Evening, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting of the Baltimore County Landmarks Preservation Commission is now in session. Please note the meeting is being audio recorded. My name is John Holman, Chair of the Commission. I will be running tonight's meeting. We're your volunteer representatives appointed by our county councilperson or county executive and entrusted to monitor renovations and additions to our Baltimore County historic resources. We review and approve nominations to the Baltimore County Preliminary Landmarks List and comment on National Register nominations. Additionally, we are charged with evaluating submissions to the Baltimore County Historic Tax Credit Program that encourages the appropriate maintenance and renovation of the designated historic properties. Would the commissioners please introduce themselves by name and county council district or representation? We can go in the order listed on the PowerPoint screen.
Lily Mundroff, District 1.
Chris is out. Wendy?
You might be muted, Wendy.
I'm on mute, but okay,
There
now
you go. We hear you.
Okay. District 3, Wendy McIver.
Daniel Dean, District 5.
Ray? Ray, I think you're. No?
Ray is not here.
No, I'm not with us.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Phoebe?
Phoebe Evans Latosha, executive appointment.
Jamie Ferguson, executive appointment.
Scott Holupka, Planning Board Rep.
Ed Horde, executive appointment.
Vincent Johnson, executive appointment.
Tom is not here.
Tom, we can't hear you.
Tom is here. You should,
Is he?
Is here?
but I don't.
There it is. I don't think his sound
Chris,
connected.
Yeah, he might be having the same issue that Vince did when he was
I
trying.
will introduce him to the group. Tom Lible, welcome to the meeting. And then did Chris just join us?
Yeah, and Chris Parts, executive appointment.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Now we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
Pledge
to
allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it
stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. The Landmarks Preservation Commission operates under the authority, standards, and requirements of Title VII, Article 32 of the Baltimore County Code. We refer to the United States Secretary of the Interior Standards for rehabilitation as standard by the National Park Service. This is the accepted national standard for historic preservation projects. Our own Baltimore County Historic Preservation Design Guidelines directly reference and incorporate the Secretary of the Interior Standards for rehabilitation. We have important preservation issues to discuss and debate at each meeting. If you would like to make comments, please limit your comments to the specific application or proposal submission being reviewed. We ask for your assistance and understanding so that discussions do not digress. As an additional comment, we can all agree that historic preservation is an important aspect of the quality of life and place that makes Baltimore County unique. As a commission, we seek to recommend significant buildings and places for landmark consideration to the County Council for their final vote. As commissioners, we serve on the commission due to our expertise, interest, and passion for historic buildings and places and review submissions based solely on their merit. While we may disagree in discussion and voting, we continue to be a collegial body that respects each other personally and professionally. Any staff reminders?
Just a reminder for offering testimony. We do allow members of the public to speak on items, providing testimony during the meeting, or we ask those to register in advance with staff, or they can provide written testimony, but staff will unmute and announce the names of those who have registered at the appropriate time. Applicants don't need to sign up. They will be offered time to address the commission as needed. And just Oh, sorry, John. And just a reminder that the LPC does receive all application materials a week prior to the meeting. The information presented in this presentation is just a summary of that, just to keep the meeting in an organized manner.
And then how about any anything we need to talk about and changes to the preliminary agenda?
There was one change to the preliminary agenda regarding item number 12, the TP property. The asbestos siding replacements was corrected. It was previously written as vinyl siding. It is in fact asbestos siding, so that's been updated.
Thank you, Jessica. Hearing no others, are there any proposed changes to the minutes? Anybody? Also hearing none about changes to the minutes. May I have a motion to approve them?
I move that we approve the minutes.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And then we can do this by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. And then the consent agenda.
So first we have agenda item number 5, the Lacaxis property at 1550 South Rolling Road in Relay, County Council District number 1. This is a non-contributing resource within the Relay County Historic District, and the applicants have proposed the removal of the existing rear deck and screened-in deck and the installation of paver patio and associated grading, and additionally a rear fence removal. Then we have agenda item number 8. This is the DeLisa property at 111 North Beechwood Avenue in Catonsville, County Council District number 1. This is a contributing resource within the Old Catonsville National Register Historic District, and the applicant is seeking Part 2 approval for in-kind slate roof repairs.
Thank you, Jessica. Commissioners, is everybody okay with these items staying on the consent agenda, or do we need to pull one off for further consideration? Hearing no objections, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And I think this needs to be a roll call vote. Jessica, right?
Could we have Lily, please?
Yes.
And Tom, is your do you have audio with us now?
It does. Go ahead, Tom.
Aye.
Hey, Tom, can you hear us? Do we have your vote? For the
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, aye.
Great, thank you. Chris Parts, please.
Yes.
Vince, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Ed,
Yes.
Dan,
Yeah.
Wendy, please.
Yes.
Phoebe,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
and John, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yes. And so the next item is item 4, right?
Yes.
That's me. All right. Welcome and thank you all for attending this evening's public hearing on the McGrain House for inclusion on the Baltimore County preliminary landmarks list. To note, the nominated was submitted as a third-party nomination under the following criteria under Criterion Run, which is an association with an important person, group, event, or series of events of historical importance, and Criterion 2, which is a distinctive example of a particular architectural style or period. So for justifications under Criterion 1 is association with John McGrain Jr., Baltimore County historian and author. And then for Criterion 2, for architecture style under the vernacular, center cross gable, or the folk Victorian. Just some notes and background for those who are in attendance or not familiar with their landmark nomination process. This process is conducted for all landmark nominations. Staff conducts additional research beyond the information presented in the nomination in order to determine the significance and historical integrity of the nominated property and review the justifications presented in the submitted nomination form to determine if a property meets the criteria for which it was nominated for. An evaluation, staff and the LPC may utilize the Secretary of Interior Standards publication, How to Apply the National Register Criteria for Evaluation, which is outlined in the LPC's historic guidelines and regulations, which are available on the LPC's website. So the McGrain House is a two-story frame vernacular cross gable structure that was built by contractor William A. Cranston in 1883 for John McGrain, an Irish immigrant. The house was occupied by members of the McGrain family up until 2001 after the death of John McGrain Jr., the great-grandson of the original owner. The property was sold to its current owners in 2022, I'm sorry. The house has an association with the former Baltimore County historian and author John William McGrain Jr., who resided in the house from 1943 to 2021. John McGrain Jr. was the executive secretary of the Landmarks Preservation Commission from 1976 until his appointment as the Baltimore County historian in 1998, a role he held until his retirement in 2006. McGrain spent his decades-long career with Baltimore County's planning department, surveying, researching, and documenting hundreds of historic properties within Baltimore County and surrounding areas. He was an accomplished photographer and author who published numerous articles, publications, and books, all pertaining to the history of Baltimore County and the surrounding areas. 34 Willow Avenue is located off of York Road, just south of the intersection of Towsontown Boulevard, on just about a little above a quarter-acre lot on the south side of Willow Avenue. The house is positioned in the northeastern quadrant of the parcel, set close to Willow Avenue. There are no other buildings present on the property. Willow Avenue borders the property to the north. 32 Willow Avenue borders the property on the west. 17 Linden Terrace to its south. And to the east, a row of single-story garages associated with the properties on Walden Drive. The property is also located within the boundaries of the Towson Manor Historic District that is surveyed in the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. 34 Willow Avenue is considered a contributing resource to the history and significance of the district. The district was considered locally significant in its suburban development around the city of Baltimore, specifically around Towson, and exhibits examples of late 19th and early 20th century architectural styles. All right, I'm just going to go into a brief historic context around the property and the development of the area, just to establish some background. So Baltimore County was established in 1659. Its boundaries originally encompassed much of northern Maryland, including parts of Carroll and Howard counties, Harford, Cecil, and Kent counties, and today's Baltimore City. In 1768, the Baltimore County seat was moved from Joppa in present-day Harford County to Baltimore Town. Finally, in 1854, the city of Baltimore separated from the county and became an independent political entity. So one of the early transportation routes leading to Baltimore was the road from York, Pennsylvania. The York Road, or known as York Turnpike, was initially cut around 1743 and quickly became a favored route. Ezekiel Towson, son of William Towson, who settled on a Baltimore County farm near York Road in 1752, opened his Towson Tavern at the crossroads of York and Joppa Roads in 1768, which eventually became the site of the old Towson Hotel. As roads and transportation improved, outlying towns like Towson Town were becoming suburbs of the busy city, connected by horse-drawn omnibus lines. This early form of mass transit provided easy and relatively cheap access to city employment while allowing people to avoid crowded city living. The omnibus was replaced by the streetcar rail system, which reached Towson around 1863. The growth of Towson paralleled these advances in transportation. As a result of these advances in transportation, several planned subdivisions in various stages of development on the former country estates of the Harrison, Brown, Register, and Owens family. The Idlewild community was laid out on the Register family estate. On the Harrison estate, started the community by Ansley, and Stoneley was on the Brown estate. The Owens farm, known as Egbert Vale, located north of the Stevenson farm on the south edge of Towson, began its subdivision after the death of Johnny Owens in 1889, following the lead of adjoining property owner and trustee of the Owens estate, David E. McIntosh. David McIntosh was a Towson lawyer who initiated the first wave of subdivision on the south edge of Towson town following his 1877 purchase of 9.5 acres south of Hill and Road on the east side of the York Turnpike. McIntosh immediately subdivided the parcel, and in 1878 he leased his first lot to John McGrain. In 1881, John McGrain purchased his leased lot on Will Avenue for $425. John McGrain hired local contractor William Cranston to construct the modest house located at 34 Willow Avenue in 1883. Mr. Cranston constructed the house following specifications in his contract for a total of $1,070. The two-story frame house was constructed in the vernacular style with a center cross gable roof and a rear kitchen out. The interior plan is consistent with an I-house plan, which is a structure that is 2 rooms wide and 1 room deep. This style of dwelling was very commonplace during the 18th and throughout the 19th century. Many of these structures had rear L additions, creating an L footprint. By the late 19th century, this style was easily elaborated with front porches and other decorative details. This is also sometimes referred to as a folk Victorian style. At the time of the McGrain's house's construction, the spread of Victorian era styles was made possible by railroads expanding into smaller towns and cities. Architectural pattern books and trade books were a popular trend during the late 19th century and early 20th century, with A.J. Downing's being one of the popular ones. These books were easily available to local contractors and builders, and designs could easily be altered for all classes. Post-Civil War factories that had machines capable of mass-producing standardized housing elements, which made it easier to add elaborate details to vernacular dwellings, including items like turn posts, spindlework detailing, and decorative brackets and molding. Mass-produced wood features could be transported quickly and cheaply almost anywhere by train. This made it easier to apply architectural forms to suburban residents of all classes. Home builders often simply added trim and ornament to traditional folk or vernacular houses. Older vernacular dwellings were often updated with new ornamentation now available everywhere due to these pattern books and mass production and sale of wood features. It is evident that the McGrain house, as well as other houses in Baltimore County that have, this is an example and is shown on the McGrain house as well as other houses within Baltimore County with a similar architectural style. So John McGrain was born in County Meath, Ireland in 1825. He and his wife entered the United States sometime in the early 1950s through New York City. Prior to moving to Baltimore County in the early 1860s, his family resided in Montgomery County. John and his wife had 6 children: John, James, Thomas, Owen, Mary, and William. Mr. McGrain worked as the farm manager at Egbert Vale Estate starting in 1863 until Mr. Owens' death in 1866. The McGrain family lived in a cottage on the property before the house on Willow Avenue was constructed. Egbert Vale was built in 1868 as a country home of one of America's best known and wealthiest actors of the 19th century, John Owens. It served as his and his wife's main residence until his death in 1886. It served his retreat from public life. He stayed there whenever he wasn't on stage, most often in the summer months and during breaks in his schedule. By his own description, he was a gentleman farmer and was known for his humorous stories about his lack of knowledge of farming techniques and his expensive farming hobby. And it is assumed that Mr. McGrain helped to manage Mr. Owens' this farming hobby. Mr. McGrain died at his home at Willow Avenue in 1895. The property was left to his son James, who was the manager at the greenhouses at Shepherd Pratt Hospital. James died in 1937, leaving the property to his wife Ella. During World War II, Ella took in boarders until her death in 1943. Ella and James did not have any children, so the property passed to their nephew, John William McGrain Sr. and his wife, Teresa. And at the time, they had two sons, John William McGrain and Robert McGrain. Teresa passed away in 1964, and John McGrain Sr. passed away in 1968, and the property eventually was transferred to their eldest son, the late John McGrain Jr. John McGrain Jr. was born on September 25th, 1931 in Baltimore, Maryland. He moved into the house at 34 Willow Avenue with his family in 1943 at the age of 12. He graduated from Loyola High School in 1949. Mr. McGrain continued his education at the now Loyola University. He served in the Army Signal Corps in West Germany and became a technical writer for the Bendix Corps. His early career, he was an editor for McGraw-Hill subsidiary and did contract writing for the U.S. government, U.S. Department of Commerce, and historic surveys for Baltimore County, the state archaeologist, and the General Services Administration. Mr. McGrain joined the Baltimore County Department of Planning in 1976 as the executive secretary for the newly formed Landmarks Preservation Commission, or LPC. The LPC was established to help with the designation of historic properties and the creation of the preliminary landmarks list and the county historic districts. At the time, McGrain was the only worker. He had no desk or filing cabinet, and I can tell you now that we have too many filing cabinets filled with lots of his notes and his work. McGrain helped the commission grow to its current 15-member volunteer members and helped grow the planning department staff. In 1998, McGrain officially became a county historian, a position he held until his retirement in 2006. McGrain spent his career with Baltimore County surveying, researching, and documenting hundreds of historic properties in Baltimore County and other areas, and he was the forefront of the preservation planning section and helped it to grow to what it is today. He was considered the authority on historic mills in Maryland. He has published numerous articles, publications, and books all pertaining to the history of Baltimore County and the surrounding areas. He was the first person to start documenting the county's historic properties in the late 1970s, and his efforts had a great impact in local planning. In addition to his published work, there are numerous unpublished resources such as research topic bibliography, studies, and papers that are on file with the Department of Planning. After his retirement in 2006, John was still active in his research and photography. And Mr. McGrain passed away in May of 2021. All right, so the designation criteria for inclusion on the Baltimore County Landmarks list follows closely to the National Register criteria. Our designation criteria are established in our county code, section 32, article 7, 302, which is the preliminary county landmarks list. Commissioners must specifically find that the structure qualifies by meeting one or more of our criteria. So for criterion 1, association with a person, properties should illustrate a person's important achievements. It should be associated with a person's productive life, reflecting the time period for which he or she produced the majority of the work which they are known for. and they're typically not commemorative, and the achievements must have been made more than 50 years ago. So the McGrain House does have an association with the McGrain family, most notably Baltimore County historian and author John McGrain Jr. resided in the house from 1943 to 2021. McGrain Jr. was the executive secretary of Baltimore County Landmarks Preservation Commission from 1976 until his appointment as the county historian in 1998, a role he had until his retirement in 2006. He spent his decades-long career surveying and researching and documenting historic properties. And his contributions locally impacted or strongly impacted local history and could be identified and documented through his published works. So the period of significance for 34 Willow Avenue's association with John McGrain would be from the 1970s to about the 2010s, with his last published book in 2012. So this represents the period of time when McGrain was actively engaged in his field and produced the majority of the work for which he was most known for. So properties eligible under Criterion 1 are usually those associated with a person's productive life, reflecting the time period when he or she achieved a significance rather than commemorative. Even though the house is older than 50 years old, and 50 years is the benchmark for considering something as historic, its association with John McGrain, however, is less than 50 years. This makes it difficult to place within a correct historic context. This is why properties associated with living persons are not eligible. It is important to be able to evaluate the accomplishments of an individual objectively with the benefit of historical perspective that passage of time allows. The recent nature of much of his work raises the question as to whether there has been a sufficient passage of time to allow for objective assessment of his work. McGrain's achievements in helping to establish an advancing historic preservation planning program in Baltimore County is easily more significant on state and national level as it follows state and national planning trends in the late 1970s. However, there hasn't been sufficient passage of time for scholars who have developed an interest in, conducted research on, and made critical judgments about how important preservation has become within the planning field. While yes, the house is associated with John McGrain and he did wonderful things, however, his association with the house cannot on its own be used to justify the nomination. Criterion 2. And for distinctive examples of particular architectural style, period, or type of construction. So properties must retain a majority of their features that characterize their type. Historic exterior building materials that are covered by non-historic materials, such as modern siding. The property can still be eligible if the significant form, features, and detailing are not obscured. And a property must retain integrity to reflect its significance through architecture. There are 7 aspects: integrity. Not all of them have to be present, but usually most of them will be. And then we also have to compare the property with other examples in the area. So for the center cross gable vernacular style or folk Victorian, this was a style that was popular from the 1870s, the 19-teens. This is a 2-story subtype with a center cross gable. Some of the identifying features of this type is porches with spindle work or flat jigsaw cut details and trim, symmetrical facade, cornice, line brackets, and often they will pull some details from either like Italianate, Queen Anne, or Gothic architectural styles. So the house has not been moved from its original location. The house's integrity of setting has been diminished in the surrounding area due to development. However, the immediate setting, including the size of the property, has relatively remained the same since the house was constructed in 1883. The house's integrity, materials, and workmanship is somewhat diminished due to the installation of vinyl siding, replacement windows, and replacement front door. But despite this loss of some material integrity, its exterior retains its wooden decorative porch elements and a small Gothic style inset window in the cross gable. In addition, its original footprint, symmetrical facade, arrangement of openings, and massing are unaltered. And because of this unaltered state, the house still is recognizable as an older constructed house, thus retains an integrity of feeling. So the McGrain house does still convey integrity of location, setting, design, and feeling, and expresses it as an example of a particular architectural style or period under criterion 2, despite having vinyl siding and replacement windows. But with that in mind, this architectural style, vernacular, or folk Victorian is a common building type found in Baltimore County in the state of Maryland and also nationally. There are other examples in our county that some of them are better preserved and that retain more material integrity. You can see these examples from the Glendon and Lutherville County historic districts, and also several final landmarks. And so with that all in mind, staff encourages the LPC to review the information presented and the information that they were provided earlier this week and have a thoughtful discussion on whether or not the property meets the criteria for designation, then vote to approve or deny the property's inclusion on the preliminary landmarks list. All right, back to you, John.
Thank you so much. And my golly, that is remarkable detective work, and really appreciate that background and the work you did on that. Thank you. Do we have members of the public who would like to speak to this issue?
Yes. So first, we had a lot of written testimony. We're not going to read through all of it because a lot of it was very repetitious. A lot of them are saying the same thing. So we do have a list of, we also forwarded all these letters to the commission this entire week as we got them. So the commissioners, to those who are joining us from the public, the commissioners all received these and were able to read them in advance. So this is a list of all those who submitted in opposition. And then we have a list of those who submitted for support. And then we do have a few that are signed up to speak. We were gonna want to hear from the property owner first and then go to the ones who registered to speak in that order. So the property owner first and then the rest of members of the public.
Yeah, so Chris and Denise Moen, I can unmute you and you can have the floor.
All right, great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. My name's Chris Mullen, and I'm here with my wife Denise this evening. First, thanks to Caitlin and Jessica for all your help working through the application. And also, it's a pleasure to address this commission. So just, I don't know if you all had a chance to read our letter. It was maybe a little bit detailed, but I'll just try to touch on some of the highlights. So first, just to give you a perspective on us as owners, Denise and I are experienced structural engineers, university researchers and educators, scholars of engineering history, and for sure, totally appreciate architecture. So we purchased this property with an auction. We didn't know who owned it. We didn't know much about it. We knew it wasn't a landmark at the time in August of 2022, and we purchased it thinking that we were going to try to renovate it. So for the next maybe year or so, we focused on that, talking to many contractors, and we also know, like Denise and I have studied the makeup of the commission, and we understand like that many of you are preservation architects and related to that field. So you can imagine, like it was when we're talking to 20 specialty contractors and learning all about it, that it was like a lot of variability, and we realized that overall, based on the condition of the house, which is actually not that great on the inside, not that great at all, including some pretty major structural, like what at least one major structural flaw. Since Denise and I are structural engineers, we can't help but like, so there's the primary bearing wall down the middle of the house was never supported well since 1883, since it was built, and so it has settled by as much as like maybe 10 inches, which has dragged the whole house, the interior of the house down, racking all the frames, and it was stopped at some point with a prop in the basement. And so as a structural engineer, actually, if I went down and if I thought about like kicking that prop out, it's under a lot of load right now. If I kicked it out, I think I'd be a little bit scared of what might happen. But just judging based on the condition of the house, mainly the interior for us, like we have have a young family, young kids, and the price tag for renovation, like $400,000, is what we were coming up with average finishes. We after about a year of study, we decided to start thinking about, okay, well, we have the option to build a nice new house here, especially there's development right down the street, like new development, and we were for sure paying attention to the neighborhood, like the style of the neighborhood, but we were like, let's explore that. And so we spent maybe 2 years now studying this, and so that was the first year was renovation. The second year was thinking about a new home, and we more or less decided that it made more sense to build a new home, and the reasons for that are stated in our letter. So we started talking to neighbors about that, trying to spread the word, and so we were gearing up for that, honestly, to start build a nice home, we have like a architect and like a custom builder, and like it's gonna look nice. But we received a letter from Baltimore County in April 2024, so we were surprised by this application, and we were not involved with it or asked about it. So now I guess it's maybe our point to like just try to emphasize some of what we think are the weaknesses in the application. The first one is we think that the community support is overstated. So we've only met 2 people who support this landmark status in the neighborhood. It's the applicant, Ed, and another neighbor. So most of the people that we've talked to, including, you can see here, like the letters, that written testimony are coming from the Towson Manor Village board, and the letters opposing the application. So so most of the people were very positive about us thinking about trying to make some new history and invest in the neighborhood. Like now, just thinking more about the criterion, like we totally respect Mr. McCrane, like in his work. When after the auction happened, we realized that we had one of his books on his shelf, the Charles Street Artery of Elegance book. Like before we had even knew about this house, we had his book. So like we're for sure respect him. I would say, like, if we're trying to think about how like this house connects to, like, this structure connects to him, as Caitlin was laying out, like that feels a little bit weak. Like there's nothing left in the house that represents him in the buildings. Also, like based on our observations, like you can tell that he himself did not care that much about preserving the house. Like there have been many modifications and just not much, honestly, upkeep or preservation at all, including like the beautiful, like the original pine floors have 1/2-inch structural plywood screwed, like with thousands of screws connected, like I guess pretty much to mitigate that significant bearing wall settlement inside the house. And So we don't really see this a strong point that connecting Mr. McCrane to the property, and also like the architectural style. Like I don't know. I mean that's for debate. For sure, like the pictures that Caitlin was showing showed that there are other properties that are historic in Baltimore County that represent that, or across the country. But like for us, like what we see is like a contractor built this house for someone to live in it. It wasn't necessarily designed to last like 140 years. And for us, like there's not that much left that's remarkable, or as I stated before, connected to Mr. McCrane. And I would say, like, finally, like, just overall, this process of of us having to defend ourselves, like, in this situation, having is a little awkward. Like we've learned a lot actually, like and learned even about historic properties and even how the process works. But like overall, it feels a little weird to us that we're expected to, or the people who are supporting this application expect us to bear the financial responsibility of renovating this property. So I think that's it. Did I miss anything, Denise?
Hearing nothing. Thank you, Mr. Mellon. We appreciate your testimony.
Denise says she's muted. I don't know. Oh, okay. She says it. She said I did just fine. So I think we're good. Thanks. I got the approval.
That's always,
All right.
always the best endorsement to have. Exactly.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And then you can see on the screen, commissioners, that we will be limiting additional comments from other of the listening members who want to comment on it to the standard 3 minutes. Jessica, do you have that?
Yeah, so next we have Mr. Ed Kilcullen to speak. He is the property. So Ed, I have you unmuted. Hi Ed, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Now we can.
Okay. All right. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Ed Kilcullen. I actually grew up in the neighborhood on Willow Avenue until 1977, returned in 2001, and have lived here in my current home since then. I was contacted, and I've served as president of the neighborhood association for 10 plus years, several years ago. I was contacted by a neighbor in January who reported that a BGE representative working on the new gas line installation on Willow Avenue told him that they were not connecting 34 Willow Avenue to the new gas line because the current owners plan to demolish the house. This was a complete surprise since the owners had assured neighbors that they plan to renovate and move into the house. While the president and vice president of the Council Manor Village Community Association opposed the nomination, at no time was the community informed of the plans to demolish the house nor the nomination. So their letter should be considered their individual opinions, not the opinion of the community that they represent. Our community is approximately 475 houses. So the statement by the owner that they only met 2 people who oppose it, I don't think is representative of 475 households. They are also, when I talked with the community association officers who have opposed the nomination, they're basing it on information they received from either directly or indirectly from the owners, which had misinformation with statements such as the house is structurally unsound, and that it was only built to last 30 years. That's something that's been repeated to me by Ms. Moen several times. And while they cite their experience and education as structural engineers, and I question why they bought the house when they clearly saw that there were some structural issues. Ms. Moen said that they were in academia, they were researchers. She specializes in metal construction, not residential wood construction. So she discounted her own experience herself. So I think again, the opinions of those who oppose it, and I've talked to some of the neighbors who also submitted letters opposing the nomination, did it out of fear, generated by stories that it would become a student rental, that it would become a bed and breakfast, and so on. So I think while Mr. McGrain's bulk of his work has been within the past 50 years, his father was the manager of the Egberth Vale property more than 50 years ago, and I think the work is significant. I'm sorry.
Ed, you've timed out. You've
Okay.
3 minutes.
You have my written testimony as well.
We do.
I did want to address the negative things, and I've gotten really hostile texts and emails and phone calls from people who are basing their opinions on this misinformation.
Thank you, Ed. And for those others who are waiting for testimony, while we understand that neighborhood conversations about this can sometimes get heated, what we're really interested in are the 2 criteria that Ms. Merritt mentioned that need to be met. And so if you could keep your comments to those things on the merits of the case, why John McCrane is worthy of this, why John McCrane's house is worthy of this, that would certainly help us as we go along in the discussion. Who's up next, Jessica?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mr. Khan, for your comments. Next, we have Miss Carol Allen. Carol, I have you unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Carol, thank you.
Great. I just want to say before I launch into my testimony, what a great introduction and information about the house. I want to add to that preservation is a relatively new endeavor. And it was, I think the state office was started in the late 1970s, and that's when all the properties were inventoried in Baltimore County. So I'm not sure if that affects the fact that John McGrain was within the 50-year more recent period and didn't quite fall into that. I think it's because there wasn't an opportunity for him to be there sooner than that. Am I making myself clear, or am I just
Yes.
Okay.
We take your point on that, Carol. Thank you.
Okay. I think that the other thing I want to be sure you all are aware of is that when you look at the properties listed on the landmarks list for Baltimore County, John made significant inroads in that, and it's to thank him that we have that list. Much of those properties are because of John McGrain's work to get them listed. And I think that that's extremely significant. And I feel that he was extremely helpful in forwarding our understanding of architecture and history in Baltimore County. So he's definitely a significant person. I also feel that this history is important to the citizens of Baltimore County, and that the LPC has a unique opportunity to vote for history, and that it matters. And I don't know if there are any questions. The house is definitely an example of the development of residential development in the Towson area. And I also want to add very quickly that should it be not listed and it does get demolished, that there's old wood in that house and it's extremely valuable to be salvaged. Thank you. That's it.
Yes. Point well taken on that. We always encourage what can be saved to be saved and used again.
Great, thank you very much, Carol. Next we have Miss Ann Gregson. Ann, I am unmuting you. Hey, Ann, can you hear us?
Alliance of Baltimore County. We are our county's nonprofit historic preservation organization, and I just wanted to echo what Miss Allen said about Mr. McGrain, as well as the significance in the neighborhood. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I think the other thing that's important to remember, it's not just about Mr. McGrain, it's also about his family history, both in terms of in the house itself, as well as in the community and the surrounding farms and significant properties within the county. And it's also important just because that is not what was necessarily emphasized in the nomination. That is something that the commission can definitely make their decisions on. And I think it's also very important that, you know, for the future, that there's, there's some guidance for applicants, especially those who aren't necessarily associated with professional organizations, some guidance from the staff in terms of what they find significant and what they'd like to have the applicant focus on as well, so that they can develop their proposal too. In terms of significance, just as Ms. Allen said, it is an important part of the neighborhood, and it's not just an issue of that there may be a few more examples left within the county. The importance is to really consider what is in the neighborhood. Over 40 homes were demolished for the Towson Green building area. We've lost a lot of buildings in that area, and every time one goes, it's quite significant to see it be lost. And it's still a good example of the architecture that was there, and very important to preserve, not just for the county as a whole, but also for that particular neighborhood and community. One last thing I really would like to mention, of course, we are supporting the nomination, but I think it's also important to let the nominator, in this case, Mr. Kilcullen, be able to speak for more than 3 minutes. I understand, the limitations for the general public, but I think in terms of the nominator, they should be able to speak for more than 3 minutes. And whatever time I have left, I yield to Mr. McCullen if that will not be.
Thank you for that offer to do that to Ed, but no, you may not yield your time to somebody else. And of course, in the nomination form itself, Mr. Kilcullen and the others were able to lay out their case. So while there is the 3-minute limitation for everybody, the owner, certainly that side of the story was heard. But thank you for that offer to do that. Who's up next, Jessica?
Thank you, and finally we have Mr. Rob McGrain. So, Mr. McGrain, I have you unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me speak. My name is Rob McGrain, and John McGrain was my uncle. I appreciate the history of my family, dating back to my great-great-grandfather, John McGrain from County Meath, Ireland. I went down a long road of seeing some great memories with what you shared earlier, so thank you so much. That's very meaningful. You all know my Uncle Jack, as we referred to him as John McGrain, as a county historian. He did spend his life studying architecture, mills, history of Baltimore County, historical preservation, and he understood what landmarking was, as it was a passion of his. He clearly chose in his communication with me not to landmark the home or have it landmarked, and it was nowhere in his will or his verbal wishes did he indicate to me anything about the family house becoming landmarked. I think it's important just to share from a family perspective. My uncle's biggest wish with respect to 34 Willow Avenue was that my responsibility as the executor of his estate and the closest relative in Maryland was that I make sure that a family get the house, not a developer, and definitely not a landlord looking to rent to students. I used an auction company to sell this home because I was unsure what I was getting into, not having experience selling homes and recognizing that there was work that needed to be done in the home, and I wasn't sure what that might entail. I understand the current owners of the property are having difficulty because they've done a lot of due diligence, and they're also in the background of having engineering to recognize there's issues that make it cost prohibitive, and there could be safety concerns. Not sure. They have children, but I just revisit the point that my uncle's wish was to have 34 Willow Avenue be a place where a family could live. And I think that still has the ability to do so. Just a question of whether or not it's an existing structure or it's a demo and a new building. My last piece I'd like to say is I'd like my uncle to be remembered for the contributions to Baltimore County, not the house he lived in. My uncle would have wanted this family to be able to make a home at 34 Willow Avenue, just as my great-great-grandfather did in 1883. I appreciate your consideration. And from the family perspective and talking with my siblings, we are in favor of the owners of the property being able to either have a new home or improve the home the way it needs to be done. But it really is their call. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that perspective. And certainly your uncle has a great legacy within Baltimore County, which will not soon be forgotten, not the least through his published works. Who's up next, Jessica?
Mr. McGrain was our last.
I'm sorry, say again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. McGrain was our last speaker.
Oh, our last one. Okay, Commissioner. So we've heard some testimony on both sides. Plus, you've gotten several letters from the community, both for and against. Caitlin has laid out pretty clearly what we need to consider, whether Mr. McGrain fits the category of a historic figure and whether the timeline is right. And then the second part, of course, is whether the house in and of itself is worth saving as a particular style of home. So those are the things before us. I think the motion, frankly, because it's an application for the nomination, Caitlin, maybe you can help me on this, but I think that we are presented with a motion that they're asking us to approve this application, and therefore we would vote ultimately on whether to approve it or not. So you would either vote yes or no, of course. But I think
you would have two motion options: motion to approve the application for its inclusion on the preliminary landmarks list, or you motion to deny it and not add it to the preliminary landmarks list. So it's either one.
Okay, I feel like the motion is already before us to approve, and we have to decide. But we'll take your interpretation. So, commissioners, would somebody like to put forth a motion that we could have on the floor to discuss? And you heard Caitlin talk about the two options.
I'll put forth a motion to deny the application. I think given Mr. McGrain's history and knowledge of history, his decision not to nominate the property for the many years that he lived there, to me, I think stands, as a statement of his feeling of the, of the property, and I think the criterion one does not align with the time frame of significance there.
Thank you. And then, so we need a second, and then we can discuss.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. And now it's open to discussion. Commissioners, any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, this is Phoebe. Can I get a clarification about the status of Towson Manor Village as a historic district? It does not appear that it's on the Baltimore County list of historic districts, nor on the National Historic Registry of Historic Districts. So what is the status of Towson Manor Village as a historic district?
So it's only surveyed on the Maryland inventory of historic properties. So it's essentially just a survey district that was done probably in the early, like 2010, 2012 timeframe. So it's not on the National Register or county district. But there is some research into that area and development.
Okay, so that some of the properties may be eligible for landmark status, but have not been nominated yet. The district is not an official district.
It's my understanding that many of the historic properties were demolished during the development of Towson Manor.
Okay.
Towson Green.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
In the 2010-2012 time period when it was surveyed.
It was done before, but those properties are. This is a separate section. Where Willow Avenue was the 34 was the end of the district boundary. It goes over to the 20th century, like bungalows in Cape Cod, so they're further to the east.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Yes, I feel that even aside from John McGrain, whom I knew and was the most fantastic historian I've ever met, the house itself was in the beginnings of Towson. That's historic on its own. You know, we usually kind of revere the beginnings of developing communities, and there you have an example. And I feel that it should not be demolished, that the building should be saved, you know, apart from a monument to John, which I don't think he would want. And that's why one reason I feel he didn't have it nominated, because he didn't want monuments to himself. Obviously, he didn't take good care of it, because his passion was the history of the area. And he neglected his home, which unfortunately many people, you know, who are passionate about something else tend to neglect their own. So, but I really feel strong that it should be preserved as the beginning of Towson. Because we're losing all those houses, as was just pointed out. We lost many when they built Towson Green, and you know, they're just going down. There's no history left. And I know the owner said about new history. Well, you can't have new history unless you know the old history.
Thank you, Wendy. Daniel, did I see you wanted to comment?
I had two quick comments. Number one, I think the significance comes from John McGrain actually passing away. I mean, he wouldn't nominate it for his own house in his own lifetime. He would have gone with the John McGrain Sr. on that aspect of it. So, I mean, the significance comes with a valuable resource, which would be he himself that is no longer there, trimming off those about 10 years of that 50-year criteria. So essentially on my end of things, the importance now comes from, you know, not necessarily registering his own property at the time of his own life, but the passing of him has made it even more significant as the valuable resource. Even I didn't realize I had one of his books in my history collection until all of a sudden in this, you know, presentation on the mills, I'm like, oh, I have that book. So the valuable resource, not in commemoration of him, as that's not part of the criteria, but as far as his significance, I mean, it's outstretched to the point where, you know, a lot of us on the historical end don't even realize we have resources that comes from the significance of a person who is no longer there, creating that significance. The other question I had was just on that home, the Towson home, the people from the association, is that a homeowners association where they would have some form of power and some sort of a push with like people living within the community from speaking up about an issue, or do they have no power? Is that just kind of a volunteer community association?
It is. It's a volunteer neighborhood association.
So okay.
No enforcement powers. Exactly.
No enforcement. Okay.
Yeah. Just county code.
Just county code. Okay. Yeah, because that was the other thing that I was thinking with, you know, the importance of him and now him being passing, and then you have a brand new kind of community. And then when you go down that road, you know, you have a couple old structures left, but all of a sudden it is a complete change. So the testimony received from a newer house is kind of a less push on my end of a viewpoint where, you know, you go in, you buy brand new property, you want your home value to increase, all of a sudden all these new homes, and there's a potential for a brand new house. You know, the incentives of that aspect of making a decision. So those were mine.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel. Anybody else?
John, I've got a couple of questions.
Sure, please.
One, I mean, I always find this kind of nomination disturbing when it's not the owner of the property. People who have no financial responsibility or interest in the house. Basically, it's an unfunded mandate, pushing what sounds like could be quite significant investments to try and prop up the house. And it sounds like they only came forth with this idea
when they heard that the house was going to be torn down. So it doesn't sound like there was any movement to sort of make it historic beforehand. Secondly, Wendy, the question I have for you is, following your criteria, basically any old house in Baltimore County could be considered historic.
No, this was one of the first houses built in Towson, not any house. That house started it. So there's historic significance right there. Not to do with John McGrain, but with his, and the family owned that house till, he died. That's usually considered quite significant in the historic community. So, and other parts of Towson were, preserved because of that reason. These few streets that are in this section were not. In fact, most of them were torn down to build a new development that had nothing to do with history. So they weren't even considered.
Right.
In that.
When we don't want it to turn into a revenge landmark that
I know.
that we're mad about the other
I
ones,
didn't say a revenge. I said its
Wendy,
significance was it was the beginning of Towson.
I understand. And I think you make a good point with that. It's hard for us to comment too much on the financial part, Scott. We don't.
We're not supposed
No,
to.
but
I know we're not supposed to. I have said this before. I am absolutely flabbergasted that we are forcing unfunded responsibilities on people, and that a third party can do it. I just think is unconscionable.
Point taken. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say to Scott, that's the law we operate under at this time.
Yes.
You can change the law, but not today.
And we do try to give tax credits where we can.
I have a question for staff.
Staff, when Towson was established in what date? You read it in your
17 something, right?
1716 or something.
16.
No, it's later than that.
1740. Well, York Road came through Towson in 1743.
1743. This house was.
But it wasn't established. The town wasn't established till later than that.
It's a county seat.
Let me finish.
No, it's a county
seat was in 1850s.
Yeah, county seat was much later.
So
Go ahead, Ed.
It was established in 1750, 1760. The house itself was built in 1878. Was that correct?
83. 1883.
So I question if this was one of the original houses of town. It was certainly an old house, but I don't see it as one of the beginning house in Towson.
In that particular area, it's one of the earlier houses, but not entirely of Towson for that particular side.
When I look at it and being an example of Victorian vernacular, it's got some porch detail, and that's pretty much it. And the rest of it is covered with vinyl siding. It's a very simple, very plain house. If we're talking about Victorian, to me, it's not a prime example. Some of the other photographs up there were very good examples of Victorian vernacular houses, but I don't see this as being that strong. And I think that the connection to John McGrain is tenuous, and it doesn't really meet the time frame in my view. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Phoebe. Just to clarify on the tax credit eligibility, if this is not a landmarked historic district and not an individual landmark, then it would not be eligible for historic credits. It would only be if we landmarked it, correct? Right. And the county council approved it as a landmark.
It has to be on the final landmarks list to be eligible.
The final, yeah. So it'd be a two-part process. We're not the last word on this. If we approve it, it would still have to go before the county council to approve it, and only then would the property be eligible for tax credits.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Daniel, you have another question?
Yeah, just one quick comment too, because as far as this whole process goes, I will sympathize 100% with the homeowners, 100%, because I do agree it's broadsiding a homeowner from this, uh, something that you wouldn't necessarily know about. However, the point is, brought up that under what we are asked to do here is to follow regulation and determine exactly what this falls under with the criteria. So, just as a reminder for all of us here, does this fall under the criteria, not necessarily our own personal political opinions of who owns what, whether this house was a John McGrain Jr.'s or if you lived in George Washington's house and it just so happened didn't get put on the list, and then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, you shouldn't tear down George Washington's house. Does this fit the criteria of the significant figure or the architectural standpoint? So just since it's being recorded and on the record, I'd rather have that on there.
Yep. Thank you. Of course, criteria are fundamental to what we're discussing. Anyone else? Hearing none, we will put it to a roll call vote, and I remind everyone that we must have 7 votes to carry the measure to deny, which is what we're voting on. So a yes vote is saying that we are not approving it for the landmarks.
All right, folks, could we please have Lily?
Oh.
Tom, please.
Aye.
Chris?
Yes.
Vince?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Dan?
No.
Wendy?
No.
Phoebe?
Yes.
Jamie?
No.
And John, please.
Yes. So we are left with 6.
My name wasn't called.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Scott. Yeah, could I have your vote, Scott?
I vote yes.
Great.
So that does make 7 votes, and the motion carries to deny the landmark status. Did I count the numbers right, Jessica?
Yes, that's correct. We have 7 members voting yes, and we have 4 voting no.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all, and thank you to the neighborhood for spirited discussion. These are important things to look at, and they're very hard decisions for us to make, and I know they're hard for the neighborhood. Next up is another neighborhood thing.
Right. So we have agenda item number 6 is the Towson High School BCPS property at 59 Cedar Avenue, County Council District number 6, final landmark number 310. And the applicants have proposed a selective demolition and construction of a new rear addition. So we have the project representative on tonight. Let me just pull.
Yeah. No, I have promoted David Fisher to a panelist, so he is going to present the proposal to the commission so he can share his screen.
Great, thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah. David, you're promoted to a panelist. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass the host position on to you.
Thank you very much for having me to present this project here at just down the street at Towson High School. Just want to pull up my screen here. So let's move into the presentation. So first off, thank you all for having us today. A quick agenda on what we're going to talk about in our presentation to show what we're proposing to do at Towson. It's a quick background. We presented this back in January of 2023, so it's been a few minutes. I believe we have a few new commissioners, so this we were going to kind of go in depth and give the full background for those who weren't here in January 23. Go through the process of how we developed a scope, our kind of historic preservation measures that we're taking, and ultimately the proposed design concept that we're hoping to get your input and review on. Order of time here, I'm going to kind of blow through these rather quickly. Obviously, question and answer. If there's anything you'd like me to go back to, I'm happy to circle back. Here you can see the site, existing site on the left, with what the site currently looks like today on the right. It's just a general context of where we are. We are right adjacent to the Aigburth Vale property, as well as across the street from the East Burke Avenue Historic District. Our building here is on both the county list as well as the Maryland inventory of historic properties. So our building was been modified several times over the years, originally constructed in 1949 with an addition very shortly after in 53. Additions kind of throughout the time. One quick note for you, the 1998 alteration was rather extensive. Every inch of the building was touched. And this includes all new exterior doors, all new windows, and all new roofing. So our site is rather tucked away from the public right-of-way. So just a quick diagram to show what portions of this building are really visible from the public right-of-way. Those are kind of highlighted in orange, with the most architecturally significant portions identified with the darker red color. This would be the main entrance. Turn on my pointer. Our main entrance, which is visible off of Cedar Avenue, and kind of the auditorium entrance. And I'll show you some photos of those in just a moment. And there you go. Here's the moment, our main entrance and the auditorium entrance at the bottom. So identifying some various character defining elements, the fieldstone, the horizontality. It's fairly typical of this kind of mid-century, early mid-century, kind of late modern time period here. While we're primarily talking about the exterior for the Landmark Preservation Commission, we are dealing with the interiors as well in our work with the Maryland Historic Trust. Most of this interior has been pretty significantly affected and is no longer really intact, with the exception of our main lobby, which is on the top here, as well as the lobby to the auditorium at the bottom. And then there's also existing terrazzo flooring in our corridors that's still intact. All right, so just background on the building. When we started this project way back when, the first step was really identifying, what is an acceptable scope that really balances all the needs of both this is a school building, this is a public building and part of the community, as well as a historic building speaking to kind of the generations of Towson students that have passed through here. So with that in mind, we went through a process of identifying a full range of options. So on the left in option A, you can see here's what it might look like if we were to not demolish anything, or minimally demolish and really focus on additions in order to create the new spaces that were needed to provide for the educational needs of the community. Going through successive versions with more demolition and less addition, all the way through to option D, which was a full demolition and replacement. They were receiving plenty of feedback throughout the beginning of this job, with people asking for various preferences, wanting to keep, wanting to demolish and start over. So we went through a community input process, a series of meetings open to the public. I believe several members of the LPC commission joined us in some of those meetings, and open this up for comments in both in the meetings as well as online. So we received plenty of public comments on the website. Here's just an example of some of them. And what we found was about half the people wanted to fully replace it with a brand new school, and half the people wanted to maintain the historic fabric. We also got a formal feedback from the LPC here, kind of outlining, that option D of totally tearing down the building and replacing it would not work, would not be in compliance with county code, and we would not be able to get a permit going that route. Similarly, option A, they kind of understood that that wasn't really feasible to meet the educational needs of the community. So with that in mind, we kind of ended up striking the options that didn't work and realized that we were going to need to find someplace in the middle. Surprise, surprise, trying to balance out all the varying needs, we ended up right in the middle. So we looked to kind of create an option that was even between B and C, that's really smack dab in the middle. This is where we ended up with the scope study, keeping our most historically significant wings. So the historic auditorium, the 1949 classroom wing and main entrance feature, demolishing many of the additions that were put on in 1967, 1998, and then demolishing some of the larger public volumes from the 1949 construction that just really couldn't accommodate current needs due to their spatial limitations. And then lastly, demolishing the rear non-public facing wing of the 1949-53 classroom bars, the kind of interior facing wings, so that we could build out spaces with a larger footprint for some of the lab spaces, some of the more hands-on instructional spaces that unfortunately just could not fit within the structural bays of the existing building. This process also gave us some historic preservation strategies we came out with. What to avoid, retaining the most prominent elevations, keeping our intact interior spaces, how to minimize, make sure we're not overpowering the historic fabric by strategically locating additions, and then potential mitigation steps. So restoring these beautiful bas-reliefs that are at the auditorium entrance, taking this historic clock off of the portion of the building that's being demolished and reincorporating that into our new design, as well as creating historic interpretation signage to locate in the public portion of the building. So we're here to propose the final design. So this is kind of where we want to show you where we ended up. So we are refronting the school as one of the bigger moves of this job. So most visitors come to the school off of Birth Road. That's where Google Maps sends you when you want to go to the school. So we want to make sure they're coming to the main entrance. With that in mind, though, we will be maintaining the historic entrance, including this formal entry plaza that faces Cedar Avenue. So the historic approach will remain very much the same for the neighborhood. The building itself, you can kind of see in the gray are the areas that will be renovated. So the classrooms facing Cedar Avenue and the existing corridor, as well as the auditorium, which will be kept maintained as an auditorium in the same location, and then a series of additions around there. So here we have the ground floor, the first floor. You'll notice here we're actually below the historic entrance from Cedar Avenue. The historic building is actually tucked into the hill using the topography. It's a pretty hilly site that we have here. So our new main entrance would be on the opposite side. As I mentioned, we're refronting the building. So we'll be right next to the auditorium entrance. We're actually going down a level from there, just like the historic building was built into the hill. We're trying to do something similar here, with the thought process being we're trying to put a lot of new program on this site, and we wanted to try to tuck it into the topography as much as possible to help minimize the scale of this addition and try to not overpower the historic building. All right, now we're skipping up to the second floor here. You can see the historic lobby is in this location here. And one of the elements of the design that we really are proud of the way we were able to kind of connect this historic main entrance through a direct access down to our new entrance to try to tie those spaces together. So instead of communicating stairs to bridge the second floor and the first floor and tie these two entry points together. This axonometric here also gives you a great impression or understanding of how we're building at the back side of the historic wing with some really large volume spaces. And you can see these big rooms, how they would not be able to fit in a bay that was the same width as on the other side of the corridor. So moving up, we are providing a third floor with a very similar footprint. And lastly, we do have a fourth floor in our addition here. And you'll notice this fourth floor is not any taller than the the vertical elements of the historic main entry feature. All of our building, the parapets are lower than that historic top parapet of the building. So from the exterior, you can go through the elevations. And we wanted to make sure that our proposed design was sympathetic to the historic, but not looking to duplicate it. Want a clear distinction between what's existing and what's new. So our process again started with analyzing the existing building. You can see on top is the Cedar Avenue facade. Trying to understand the principles of this composition and how, so then we can then utilize those principles to guide our new design. So identifying items like key datum lines, proportions of entry spaces, the rhythm of glazing and where there's openings versus where there's solids. Trying to utilize those elements into the new design that you see down below, with a strong emphasis on the horizontality of the classroom bar, a vertical tower element at the main entrance to signify this is where you need to come to get in. Recessing our top story back visually with the change of materials and kind of creating that strong datum across the top that is lower than the main entry feature. We're also utilizing what we were calling little hyphens. So where we are touching to the historic, we're trying to, one, touch it as lightly as possible with vertical slot windows of glass, as well as changing materials to that darker to kind of recede from view, as well as making sure the parapet lines where we're connecting are just a little bit lower and set back in plan as well to just gently touch the auditorium, the historic building, as lightly as possible. Materiality is very crucial in this. We aren't looking to replicate the field stone of the historic building or the granite of the historic building, because those aren't really appropriate or for kind of current school construction. That's not how schools are built these days. We want something that speaks to 2024. So for our historic building, we're utilizing predominantly masonry construction. So what you see in the beige, this color here, is a concrete masonry unit. That is a kind of a cream beige color. The title from the company is called Briar. And it's really draws its inspiration from the thick mortar lines of the historic fieldstone building, trying to tie a warm color, a warm background for our field. The vertical elements kind of slicing through, replicating the granite or speaking to the granite infill and the horizontal banding of the classroom wing. We're using an iron spot brick. We'll be using a 2 1/4 by 16-inch brick, trying to get kind of a long horizontality to that to speak to the horizontality of the building. And then in certain locations, we're transitioned to metal panels where structurally it makes sense to reduce our loads. So to replicate or speak to the brick, the dark brick, we have a horizontal metal panel. And then on the back side of the building, rather than using this concrete masonry unit and beige, we switched to a similarly colored metal panel also. So with that, I do have a video fly through. If we're doing okay on time, I'll try to get it to play. There we go. Just to show how this thing goes through. You can see from the Cedar Avenue side, the appearance stays very much the same. You see a small peeking out of some of the penthouses of the new addition, but for the most part, we're really tucked around and underneath to minimize the impact on the front appearance. From a drone, you'll see we are adding quite a bit of program, but from the human eye level, it's really minimized by building down the hill and recessing this into the lowest part of the site. Coming around to the front, you can see again how we're recessing it into the hill so that public feet functions on the lowest level can still be accessible from the main entry level, but again, help us bring this building down You can see our vertical tower element here, replicating the idea of the vertical tower element at the front, with the relocated clock right there beaconing people into the site where they're coming to the main entrance. You see the horizontal elements of this classroom wing similar to the existing building. And this tower really a strong focal point to draw people to the main entrance. Our tower is just a few inches shorter than the historic tower, but very similar height. Taking a couple sections through here, you can kind of see the new lobby with that communicating stair that draws people up to the second floor. Then coming around the other side, we'll cut a couple more sections to see how this is tucked into the hill to minimize the visibility from Cedar Avenue. So trying to hide it as much as possible behind this parapet. With our construction built on top of the public spaces to keep this footprint as tight as possible. So that stair tower element at the main entrance as a and coming across the front, really emphasizing the horizontality of this facade. The way this rendered, this building looks really white. Apologies for that. It is going to be more of a warmer cream color, like the mortar joints of the historic fieldstone wall. All right, so just a couple stills from that video. And then with that, I'd love to end the presentation and speak to any comments or questions you may have.
Thank you so much, David. Very well done and thorough as the other times I've seen it. So very good. Commissioners, any questions or thoughts on what we've seen?
John, I have a quick question.
Yes.
What will be the student capacity for the new school?
The proposed capacity, we're building to a core capacity of around a little just over 1,800 students. So by core capacity, that means kind of the large cafeterias, gyms are built for the size of 1,800 students. We actually don't have enough classrooms for that many. We're under 1,800 is the true capacity we're building for. But just in case down the road there are more students, we want to make sure we're building those core spaces large enough.
So about a third larger than the current capacity.
Than the current capacity, yes.
I
There's
know they've got more students than they have capacity for, but
correct.
about 1,200 is the current capacity.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Right. John, I have a couple of comments on compatibility there. The first, I think, is the question. I think flipping the entrance over to the Egbert entrance. I think what you had on the still there, basically, as folks are coming in, the expanded bus loop presents a very wide, solid stone wall there with no mediation for everyone coming in. So I guess I'm wondering if that's something that you would consider. I think it seems to emphasize what was what's basically the side of the auditorium there was kind of a secondary component there, and that's the first thing that everyone sees as they're coming in off the Egbert Drive. If that was something that you all had addressed, but it seems to give it significantly more prominence.
Yeah, so this angle right now, we're actually standing in the middle of the softball field. It may be a misleading angle. The approach into the site is a lot further to the right and a lot really more focused on the side of this tower element. Let's see if I can go to the site plan to help. So
Yeah.
people are coming in this way, and a lot of this side is actually screened by the trees of our neighbor's property. So it's not quite as visible to you till you get a little closer into the site.
Right. But yeah, I guess I would just, I've driven kids there for many years, and you have given that an extraordinary presence. And my concern is that is, I understand what you're saying, but I think that the reality of that is that it gives a solid masonry wall a significant presence there, and that is a concern of mine. If we're looking to flip the entrance, that maybe there are ways to diminish that, but I think that's one component. I guess I had three other comments. I think one is if you take a look at the east elevation, I think you had shown some entrance proportions in one of your diagrams, and it looks to me like the new entrance in that green piece is kind of just an overlay. You don't really read that as proportional in a similar way to the auditorium entrance. And I think if that's something you're trying to carry off, I don't feel like the facade really reads that way. And similarly, I think on that facade, I think that the lines that you've got, horizontally carry similar to what, on a long stretch of that facade carry similarly to what was done on the front. But it seems that the rectangle, the vertical rectangles at the bottom kind of diminish, kind of the secondary, piece, of the vertical that you're reading kind of behind that. And then I think my last comment is on the south elevation, which is basically the tower that I think faces the community. I guess would be the Wiltondale community, where almost everything except the end of the original building, on the far left is new. There's a large, I think that's probably the large, I guess it would be 4-story volume there. I think the way most other large kind of volumes of the building have been treated, kind of take a larger volume like that and create an element within that like a framed element, like you would see at the entrance, any of the entrances, and it looks like there are just some punched windows in the side of that. And I'm just concerned, if we're trying to work to align with, similar character of what the original building was, it seems that taking that larger gray volume and looking at that as an element that captures a larger volume within that might be kind of a friendlier relationship to what the original building had done in the way that they had created elements in the original building. Those are the thoughts that I had.
Thank you, Chris. Anything you want to add to that, David?
Yeah, so this side is really where we're placing a lot of our service elements. So it's a lot of programmatic drives to not have us looking down onto that space. Also within these, this window here, that's kind of defining our corridor. The other sides are classrooms, and within a classroom or a teaching space, wall space is really a premium, be it for cabinetry, be it for display boards. So it gets problematic from a programming standpoint to have a ton of windows.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not. Yeah, I'm not suggesting.
I definitely take the point, Will, that this is, there's not a lot of definition on this facade, and I can appreciate and understand that concern.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be windows. I think just in a similar treatment that you've got other sections that have, a combination of windows and a secondary material that still treat that in a way that makes it, more presentable as a facade.
Point well taken.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments?
This is Lily Mundroff. I did have some comments on the, I guess the selection of exterior materials and how they relate to the existing. I guess my concern, especially with the new facade or the new entrance, is that there seems to be an introduction of a lot of different materials and colors. And I guess I understand that the original building was built over time, but there is a consistency with what's there. There is a consistency of natural colors and simplicity that I think the new work. I appreciate that there is an intent to continue with the rhythm of the windows and the way the volumes read, but I think my concern is that there seems to be a lot of colors and difference of materials that perhaps you lose that simplicity of what the original building was like. So I'd like to sort of see an opportunity to maybe investigate whether some of the new colors, especially like the white, which I understand it's more of a light taupe, but it reads very different from, as a different volume. It has a different scale and a different texture than the existing. And that is quite in contrast with the gray and the dark brick that is selected. So there's a multiple layering of elements. And when you look at the south elevation, which I understand that it's not a main, it's by no means, it's a service, but there you can really see on the south elevation all of these different materials coming together. And it's just, I think there may be a way to simplify. So one of the interesting things on the main facade, on the original facade, the ribbon, the windows and the panels in between them have the colors are very similar. Here on the new entrance, the in-between panels are taking the darker of the offset and bringing that back in. So I think that you get a different reading of the horizontality of these windows, because you kind of, by nature of the colors, the vertical of whatever you're trying to put behind is really starting to become taller and more vertical. So just kind of wanted to see some further studies on the materials and the colors, because I do think they change from what the original sort of simplicity and linearity of and horizontality of this classroom spaces was from the front.
Thank you, Lily. Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Phoebe. I had a question that you didn't cover in the presentation, but I noticed in the packet, and that has to do with the signage. Am I correct that there is going to be a digital sign for one of the entrances? I know currently there are two signs for the school. There's one on the Cedar Avenue entrance that is kind of it's kind of up above the parking lot by a beautiful weeping cherry tree. And then there's another one on the Egbert Avenue side, which is not as attractive looking. Yeah, so, well, that's the Egbert Avenue sign, but then, yeah, there's one, yeah, kind of in that area. So what is happening with those signs? I don't know the age of when they were put in terms of the area of significance, but kind of questioning the placement of digital signage and what's the theory behind digital signage. I know some other BCBS schools, there was in the Towson area, there was some controversy related to digital signage.
So the older sign that's on Cedar Avenue, we're planning on leaving as is and not disturbing.
Okay, great. Thank you on that.
The newer sign, which I believe is part of the 1998 project on
Mhm.
Egbert. We will be replacing that, and that is where the new digital signage is scheduled to go.
And has there been any kind of community feedback on the digital sign? Because I don't remember seeing that in any of the community presentations. This LPC review is the first that I saw that there was a proposal for a digital sign.
I'm not sure that, well, I understand the question, Phoebe. I'm not sure that is kind of within our purview. I know you want information on it,
Well,
but I'm not sure it's part of our review process, the signs.
is the setting included in the historic designation?
No, so this property does not have a setting associated with it. It's just the building.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does kind of speak to the entrances, though.
Yes.
You know,
So,
Chris had that, other question about the entrances in the wall of
Right.
stone on the auditorium, and so what you're seeing is the front door to the school, and if that's flipping then to the to the other side, I am pleased to hear that the original sign on Cedar Avenue is staying.
Just a quick note of clarification. I misspoke when I said that sign on Egbert was from 98. That's less than 10 years old at this point.
Okay.
We have not received any comments or feedback on the digital signage at the site entrance. Providing these types of digital signs really is kind of standard procedure for BCPS. So never really got brought up because it's a standard, I guess, at these community meetings. People had plenty of other things they wanted to speak
Yeah,
about.
I don't think it came up at the community meeting. I don't remember that being part of any presentation.
Right.
And I know West Towson had a digital sign, a few years ago after it was built and there was community uproar and they had to take it down and put a non-digital sign.
Yeah, so that would be a separate issue from.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an LPC thing. I was more, my more other concern was more related to the original sign on the Cedar Avenue side. So that's just an FYI for what it's worth, not really historic.
Thank you.
It'd be good
Thank
to
you.
bring it up now before we put it in and deal with it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah,
So
that was the
appreciate
heads up part.
on
Yeah, exactly.
an issue that came up on a different job. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments from anyone?
I have a comment, Edward. I thought Chris Part's point was very good on the new main entrance at the Egbert entrance. That I think your goal to make that feel similar in proportion to the entrance, the main historic entrance of the building, I don't think makes it. I don't think it's too tied into the horizontal of the rest of the bit. You want to bring up that elevation? Yeah, the large gray mass there, I think needs some definition and some, maybe, I don't know how to design it for you, but I think it ought to feel more like the one on the front entrance. I think if you're trying to match that, which I think is a good idea for the main entrance, to sort of have a dialogue between the back entrance and the front entrance, or whichever one you want to define, but having them more similar, I think, makes a lot of sense. And I like the concept, but I don't think it's working. I think what you've got is not getting there. So I agree with Chris. I think you need to re-look at the main entry element on this Agworth Road entrance elevation.
Yeah, so one of the struggles that we really had on this was there's a lot of entrances to this school. There's the historic main entrance off of Cedar that we're maintaining, and then there's also this historic auditorium entrance. So rather than trying to pick one of the two entrances, I guess we were trying to kind of hybridize the two and come up with something that would try to bring the two of those historic entrances into unison with this new entrance. So certainly the tower element is speaking to the Cedar Avenue entrance. And then from the auditorium entrance, there's this really strong portal motif that they've created. And that's where kind of this portal shape that we've tried to create here is being generated from. So certainly it's not a direct replica.
Well, I'm not looking for a direct replica, but what I am, I mean, I heard what you said, that you wanted to have dialogue, a design dialogue between the egg berth and the Cedar Avenue entrances. And I don't think it's working. I mean, I just think you've got one large panel, whereas the others are a little more vertical, and I think, and more defined and separated from the other, because the entrance part is only the part on the left where your red dot is. The rest of it is not entrance. The rest of it is windows, and I think it's a comment I think you need to look at. I don't think it's working. If your goal is to have dialogue, you're not getting the dialogue, in my view. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Ed. Any other thoughts or comments for David?
I just offer a couple, one of which is I applaud the desire to save some of the historic facades and kind of treat them as they've always been maintained. I'm a little curious or a little concerned about the use of a concrete masonry unit for the massive field there. I haven't seen even decorative CMU come across with the kind of elevated appearance that you would want to see a project of this significance. I mean, cast stone, sure. Otherwise, I would suggest we maybe rethink that, just because it looks like can end up looking more like a mall trying to imitate stone rather than an institutional learning here. That's it. I think I echo many of the other comments that were made earlier.
Thank you, Tom.
I think that's a good concept.
Any other thoughts or comments? Hearing none, maybe we could move to a motion. And so what the motion might be that we approve the concept with the caveat that we hope that the architectural team will take these comments to heart and revisit some of the changes that the Preservation Commission members have suggested or asked for a revisit on. And that allows them to move forward, but with the understanding that these comments will be taken into consideration as they go forward. But you all can make the motion how you wish, but that's a suggestion.
I would say that's the motion, but I would add a couple of things to it. I think I agree with Tom. I think that the concrete masonry units are hard to make work and hard to make feel like it's going to work with the building. I think you need to look at a different material. And I think you need to look at the two entrances. I would add those two specifically. I think the entrance treatment on Egberth Avenue needs some more work and study. So I would add that to the approval that we're giving for basic concept.
Yes. I've noticed that somebody
Can I
is
speak to the concrete masonry unit. So this is, I might have misspoken when it's a concrete product, but it's not a standard grade concrete masonry unit. It's a higher end unit with some specialized texture to it. I'd love to be able to get a sample and provide it to the commission for you all to look at, because the photos, it's hard to say. And I've seen a lot of cheap concrete mason units that looks like crap. I'm worried that that's what you guys are envisioning in your mind right now.
Yep.
I note, Jessica, that someone has gone in the chat box and asked if they could speak. Pamela Strickland.
Yes, she's with Baltimore County Public Schools.
Okay, so
yep, we can unmute Ms. Strickland.
Okay, so we want.
Just give me 1 second. All right, Ms. Strickland, you're unmuted.
Thank you, Caitlin. I just wanted to respond to some of the questions, and I mean, as you guys are aware, we've done several of the projects where we've had to bring them to you guys, and we definitely take what you say to heart. We do work very, very closely, with our architectural team. We have in-house architects that look at the different materials, and we never want to select anything that looks cheap or doesn't look authentic. At the same time, when we started looking at materials for this school, we wanted to try to match some of the colors of the existing historic facade, but not put everything. I mean, we use a lot of brick on a lot of our buildings, and we didn't necessarily want to try to do a different color brick on this one. So the concrete masonry, we liked it, and the fact that, I mean, the Cedar Avenue entrance is the historic entrance. We're really trying to maintain the effect along Cedar, but this backside on Egbert, while yes, the building itself is landmark, this backside, I mean, as Dave pointed out from that front slide, it doesn't have the same visibility from the streets as like the Cedar Avenue entrance. So we took that into consideration when we were looking at it, and then looking at the main office itself. We have our entrance, and then we have to think, from the SEPTED and safety security standpoint, that we want visibility. So that's where we landed on a lot of these kind of larger height windows and things like that to increase that. So we don't take lightly that it's on the landmarks list, but at the same time, we need to make sure we're meeting all of our criteria, because this building's going to be here for another 50 plus years before we get around to doing significant work on it again. So we need to look at longevity of the materials, the safety and security, which is a huge thing now, and then the function for the school as well as the community. So it's a hard balance, but we've put a lot of work and effort into this to get to the point that we are. So, I mean, I know we're calling this concept, and it's bringing it to you, it is, but I know we've had several community meetings where, made several submissions to the state at this point. So I just don't know. I guess, Dave, I'll kind of lean it back on you, but revisiting all of the materials again right now, I think is a lot, and it's really going to significantly affect the schedule of this building.
Thank you. That's an important reminder for all of us that this is on a little bit of a schedule so they can build the school. It's a 4 or 5 year project. That being said, Ed, if I can reread your amendments to, I can't make a proposal, but let me put it out there again, and that we approve the work they've done in progress, and please for them to consider seriously the amendments and the suggestions that commission members have made as they go forward. I think that kind of catches it all, but somebody else will need to phrase it and say it out loud.
And John, I'll take a venture at that, and I'd suggest that we can approve the concept, but ask that they study some
I
components.
don't know what was said. That was broken up.
Okay. I'd ask that we approve the concept, but request that they study the components of the facades that have been mentioned to make it more compatible with the original character of the building. I'd like to see that again, so that that there's an assurance that that there's some study that's gone on to that. It doesn't preclude them from moving forward. I think it's a matter of refinement, not completely revisiting. So so essentially approve the concept, suggest that there be another return with a study of refinements on the elements of the facade that have been.
So just to be clear on that, if we are asking them, and this is important, if we are asking them to study it and come back to us again, we are essentially not approving it. And there is a time element. It's been through an 18-month process almost, with reviews by communities, reviews by us. So that may significantly impact the schedule on how they work going forward.
Well,
so David, can you?
I think this is a concept, though. They're presenting a concept, and we're approving the concept. We're just saying that there are a couple of details, refinements of facade material, looking at materials a little bit more, which is normal. If this really is a concept design and not design development, not construction documents, we're in a very, I know it's taken a long time, and I know it's painful, and I think there's great work that's gone on here. I think it's a very complex, very interesting design that is great. I think we're looking at a couple of fairly small points, really, in the total scheme of things. We're not saying, oh, you shouldn't do that many additions. I mean, this is pretty much what you had presented a year and a half ago, and I think it's a great step forward. But I do think there are a couple of areas that you ought to look at, and since this is concept, I would assume that you'll bring it back during design development or schematic design, and bring it back. And you're going to continue to work on this for, I would guess, another 8 months to a year.
If I can make a quick point of clarification, that the concept, this may have been a bad word choice. We are in construction documents at this point, and are working towards releasing this to bidders in October. So we're not, we don't have a schematic design phase coming up and a design development phase coming up.
So if we approve this now, we're approving it and it's not coming back to us. So that's kind of our choice. So we're approving it now, as is, with maybe some take on advisement that is not binding, or are we going to require that we approve the on concept, but require that you come back to us on materiality? I think that's what that sounds like our choice is.
Yes, Phoebe, I think you've struck it precisely. So
yeah,
we can approve it and with under advisement, or we can say essentially, no, you have to come back and show us this again before you go forward. And my caution to the group is that we've had a lot of looks at this, and delaying it at this point is a serious thing for the community. So, but again,
well, there are 2 points. It sounds to me like there are 2 options: approve it or not, because they're not going to change anything, and it's pretty much the way it is. And maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe it's far enough along. Certainly, main concept works. I think main entrance doesn't particularly work, but that's it depends on what you guys think.
And John, I would suggest that one of the things that we've done before is worked with a couple of folks and taking a look at some specific issues that we've identified and asked for those to be studied and discussed in a work group, and that would be something that could happen as well.
I think it's a wonderful idea, Chris, that a small group could then, after we vote on the measure, a small group could gather with them, and if to the extent that that David can, or Baltimore County Schools can, incorporate some changes and still meet the guidelines. But it would be non-binding, as your motion had suggested. We're approving it with these advisements, and we would be happy to sit in on a meeting with you. So
could that be time delimited, so that I'm just cognizant of the timeline for this school and how long this community has waited for this school, and the critical time period for putting out the bidding constructions. We do have a July LPC meeting, is a 1 month technical advisory committee. What would the impact be BCPS on an architect on that?
Does that mean we would meet before the end of the month? Or does that mean at the next meeting we would talk again?
It may be between meetings. A technical committee would mean a small technical advisement committee of a small number of the LPC, not to be a quorum on advisement. That the main LPC would be, giving that technical committee the authority to advise.
I think meeting this month would still work within the general timeline.
The beginning of July, is that what you said, David?
Yeah, at some point between now and the second Thursday of July.
I could nominate. I could nominate a technical committee of Chris Parts, Tom Liebel, and Lily.
Are the three of you willing to serve on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And then Vince, you had a question?
Yes, that small technical committee, that for advisement, would that be consent as well?
My understanding of what we're discussing is it will be advise and ask questions, and what can be worked out can be worked out, but they do not have, the technical committee does not have essentially veto power over the course of the project.
Okay.
And the scope of it would be materiality. The materials on that egg birth side.
I think that's certainly one of the criteria. Also taking into concern some of Commissioner Hort's concerns, talking about the overall composition of the entrance. I think we could look at that, sort of some limited areas. I think, not to speak for the commission, but I will for a second, we're not trying to redesign the whole thing at all. And overall, I'll say, I think you've done a very good job so far. It's just those final small details. And I would like to ask that if we are going to meet, that we have physical samples of materials to look at, because like that's going to either make us feel much more or much less comfortable once we can kind of lay hands on the actual materials.
Absolutely.
That's an excellent idea.
So
I think we have a motion. It's
well, Chris's motion has not been seconded, and we may need to revise it a little bit. So Chris, do you want to restate your motion?
Sure. So I would propose that we approve the concept to allow the design firm to move ahead, and that we assign a workforce or task force to review select aspects of the design that have been mentioned in the meeting here, to review between now and the next meeting to address those issues or concerns.
I think we need to amend it a little bit to say reviews in an advisory capacity.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And so do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
And then can we have a roll call vote, Jessica?
Sure. Thank you. Lily, please.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Vince.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Thank you. Phoebe, please.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
And John, please.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
David, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you have been through a lot of meetings with this, and we appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation. Always appreciate the detail you provide. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all for your time this evening.
And now we're on to item number 7.
Yes, moving
Yeah.
right along to the D'Antonio property at 1714 Kurtz Avenue. This is Lutherville County Council District Number 3, and a non-contributing resource within the Lutherville County Historic District. And the applicant has proposed the installation of a fence in the rear yard. So they wish to enclose the rear yard and adjacent parcel with a 4-foot tall white vinyl picket fence. The fencing will begin at the rear corners of the home and consists of connecting 4 by 8-foot vinyl fence segments with dog ear pickets in the style Glendale veranda. The property is considerably set back from Kurtz Avenue, and the proposed fence installation will have limited visibility from the public right-of-way. The fence is properly located in the rear yard. The height and space picket style are appropriate. However, the vinyl material is not an appropriate material choice within the Lutherville County Historic District, and existing fencing material in the surrounding community that have been approved in the past have typically been wood or black aluminum. And the guidelines are citing Chapter 6, a new construction addition and non-contributing resources, as well as Chapter 7, fences and landscape. We did have a letter from the Lutherville Advisory Committee that was circulated to the commission earlier in the week. And staff would also like to note that vinyl fencing may be considered on a case-by-case basis, and that the fencing should be of an appropriate aesthetic quality that complements the building or county historic district, and to refer to the existing fences in the surrounding community for assistance. So staff's recommendation is for the LPC to determine if the request meets our design guidelines and to approve, modify, or deny accordingly.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. So we have before us an application to put a vinyl fence up, which may or may not meet the guidelines. Any thoughts, commissioners? Any questions?
Well, just I was curious if I'm reading my Google map correctly. It looks like this property backs up to some a treed area and then to the parking lot of one of the shopping centers there off of York Road. So it doesn't back up to, I mean, so they have two side neighbors but no back neighbors. I mean, sure, you can sort of see it in the one photo there that there's the parking lot back in the distance.
Yeah, typically, if you can see it from the road, it's a concern for us.
We have in the past not approved vinyl fencing in neighborhoods. There's one case where it was on the very edge of a historic district, that it was against a parking lot in a non-historic district. And the question is, do we want to start approving vinyl fences now, when over the time I've been on the commission, which is I think 8 or 10 years, we've never allowed the vinyl fences except in cases where it's really right on the edge of a historic district. And I don't see that on the sides for sure, and I'm not sure on the back.
Would you like to turn that into a motion, Ed?
I think I
Can we hear from the homeowner first or no?
If we have questions, if there's something unclear that we would like to hear from the homeowner.
Yeah, so Miss D'Antonio is on, so I'm just going to unmute. Okay, Lisa, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for your time and for taking a look at it. Are there any questions that I could answer? I could tell you a little bit about us or why I was thinking about the vinyl fencing.
Just the why vinyl as opposed to wood.
Mostly it was about like management and upkeep, and while I see that there are a lot of wood fences, in the neighborhood, they also tend to fall apart, and then they don't often get fixed. I run my own business. My husband's a teacher in at Solars Point Tech, and we have 2 young kids. So mostly it was just trying to think about like, how do we manage a fence, you know, in the long term, and keeping it looking nice, looking presentable, looking clean, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Antonio? Hearing none. Commissioners, any other thoughts?
We have the option of approving, but with the condition that it be a wood fence.
Yes.
I'll make that as a motion then.
Okay, so the motion, I'm going to read back your motion, Phoebe, that the commission approves the fence with the condition that it be a wood fence.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ed. Thank you. Any discussion, any further discussion before we vote?
John, did I hear that we would also allow a black aluminum fence?
That was not part of the motion. Phoebe, would you be willing to
Yeah, I'd be
amend
willing
that?
to add that. I mean, to give the owner
Okay, okay.
flexibility for, you know, costs, you know.
So the motion is amended to read, we approve the fence with the condition that it be wood or black metal.
In the same design.
And
Design.
and Ed, are you willing to keep your second in place on that?
Yep.
Good, thank you. Then may we have a roll call vote, Jessica?
Can we have Lily, please?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Vince?
I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you. Ed?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Phoebe?
Yes.
Scott?
No.
And John, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
We move on to number 9.
All right. Okay, this is the Smith property at 502 Upland Road, Sudbrook Park, County Council District Number 2. The property at 502 Upland Road was constructed in 1947 and is a non-contributing resource within the Sudbrook Park County Historic District. The applicant is requesting to enclose the existing 10-foot, 6-inch by 12-foot and 3-inch rear porch to create an all-weather porch. The porch framing was previously screened and contained a door, which were removed prior to the applicant's purchase of the home. The existing roofing is corrugated plastic and contains a K-style gutter system along the north roof slope. The porch enclosure proposes the following work items. Work item 1 for the roof replacement and new gutter system installation. This includes the removal of the existing roof and gutter system, replace the roof with an SBS self-adhering rolled rubber roofing, replace the gutter system with white aluminum K-style gutters and downspout in the same location as the existing. A 12 by 4-foot solid vinyl soffit will be installed and the walls will be framed with a new header support. And then work item 2 for windows and entry door, to install 6 29-inch by 38-inch vinyl double hung windows by Windcore and 6 29-inch by 14-inch vinyl transom awning windows above each window with one over the entry. To install a new 32 by 80-inch Therma-Tru entry door with a half light and 2 panels in an existing entry opening on the east elevation. Install new hardware and a vinyl rot resistant frame. The interior and exterior will include Aztec synthetic trim lumber and will be installed along the windows and doors. And then finally a GAF 12-inch by 24-inch fiber cement siding shingle siding will be installed on the exterior and will be painted to match the existing asbestos tile on the main dwelling. Finally, work item 3 is for the HVAC installation. Will include a Mitsubishi Sun Porch system. Will be installed to heat and cool the enclosed porch, and staff would like to note that the LPC does not have purview over the interior of the structure. So we're citing Chapter 5, porches and steps, as well as Chapter 6, new constructions, additions, and non-contributing structures. Staff's recommendation to the LPC is to determine if the proposal meets our design guidelines and approve, deny, and modify accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. So we've seen the plans and the materials. Any questions? Is the owner with us, by the way?
Yes, we do have Mr. Dominic Smith online. Mr. Smith, I have you unmuted if there's anything you'd like to add.
I don't think so. You know, you've got the plans there. I'm not sure if our contractor is still with us. He was at the beginning of the meeting, but I'm not sure if he's still there.
What is the name of your contractor, if you could remind me?
Bill Frizzell.
Yes, I do have Mr. Frizzell online. Mr. Frizzell, I've unmuted you if you have anything you'd like to say.
Yes, I think you might have said vinyl siding.
Yeah, I may have erroneously.
The siding is a cement siding that matches the house at the underneath of the windows, not a vinyl siding.
Okay, yeah, I have the GAF fiber cement siding shingle. Is that
That's it.
correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, that's it. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. Any questions for either the owner or the contractor, commissioners? Hearing none, do we have any discussion?
You're muted, Ed.
Oh, Ed, I see your hand. Yeah.
I could make a motion that we could then discuss and decide if we want a second. I think we should approve. I move that we approve the design as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, was that you, Tom, for the second? Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Jessica, a roll call vote?
Okay, have Lily, please.
Yes.
Great. Tom,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Vince,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Phoebe,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and John, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, moving along to agenda item 10, the Cease property at 1605 Front Avenue, Lutherville, County Council District Number 3. This is a non-contributing resource within the Lutherville County Historic District. The applicants have proposed the construction of a detached one-story, one-car garage in the rear yard and driveway extension. So this prefabricated garage will be 14 by 28 feet with an overall height of 11 feet and 8 inches in the rear yard. The garage will be set back 5 feet from the northern or left property line located adjacent to the rear deck. The applicant also proposes to extend the existing driveway by 30 feet to access the proposed garage and then pave and resurface the entire driveway to be cohesive. The garage will sit on a poured concrete slab and the frame structure will have a front end gable roof covered with asphalt shingles. The exterior will be covered with vinyl siding, and the side elevation that will be facing toward the house will have a single leaf door centered, flanked by a single 24-inch by 36-inch window at each side. The gable end will have a standard 9 by 7 foot garage door, and staff notes that the location, size, and height of the proposed garage are consistent with our design guidelines, and additionally, the material choice for the exterior is consistent with the materials on the primary structure. So staff's recommendation for the LPC to determine if the proposal meets our design guidelines and to approve, deny, or modify accordingly, citing Chapter 6, new construction additions and non-contributing structures, County Code Section 32-7-405.
Thank you, Jessica. Is the owner with us?
Let's see. No, we do not have the owner with us tonight.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know what other garages in the neighborhood or community look like, or what's the other, what the surrounding look like?
Most of the garages are detached for the historic for contributing properties. A lot of them are detached in the rear. This is a non-contributing, so it's following a similar pattern of existing structures.
Any other thoughts, comments?
I guess my only question is whether that is really compatible with the original structure. But,
non-contributing, I don't know, is that as critical a
Oh, well, so yes, this is a non-contributing structure, and staff noted that the location, size, and height are consistent with the design guidelines, and that the material is consistent with the material of the primary structure.
Anybody want to take a run at a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve as is.
Thank you, Daniel. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vincent. And roll call vote then?
Have Lily?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Great. Have Chris, please?
no.
Vince?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Phoebe?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And John, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Now to the Holt Schmaus property, number 11.
All right. Is the Holtschloss property at 18907 Hillcrest Avenue in Parkton, County Council District number 3. This is final landmark number 160, the Talbot Fagan House in setting. And the applicant has proposed the construction of a 1.5-story garage addition. So the 2-story property at 18907 Hillcrest Ave was constructed in 1902 in the Queen Anne style and was locally designated as Baltimore County Final Landmark number 160 through Council Bill number 64-98 on August 22nd, 1998. And the applicant is requesting to construct a 1.5-story 2-vehicle garage addition on the south side elevation. The garage will connect to the main dwelling by a single-level hyphen. The topography of Hillcrest Avenue indicates that the road slopes gradually to the south and meets the floodplain of 4th Mine Branch at the intersection of Frederick Road. The sloping topography of the site necessitates the placement of the garage to be slightly below grade of the main dwelling. The hyphen will have an exterior door that will be accessed from a porch that rises 6 steps high to the first level of the south elevation bump out. Here, an existing double-hung window with 4 vertical panel lights will be expanded to fit the new entry and provide interior access from the dwelling to the garage. The construction of the garage and hyphen consists of the following. Work on item 1, construct a front porch with gaff timberline HDZ shingle roof to match the existing asphalt roof in the color slate. The roof will be supported by 4 wood structural posts fabricated by wholesale millwork in the color in the colonial style, and brackets again by wholesale millwork will be installed at the corners of the posts. Pella half-light 2-panel fiberglass entry doors will be installed at each exterior and interior entry. The hyphen will be clad in hardy plank 6-inch colonial rough-shown in the color white to match the existing dwelling and proposed garage construction. Work item 2 includes the 1.5-story 2-vehicle garage. The facade / west elevation will have a 2 carriage style garage doors with 2 horizontal transom windows with 2 panels and 3 lights above each entry. 2 Pella Impervia double hung fiberglass with 2/2 grill vinyl windows will be placed on the second level of the west elevation, and 2 Impervia double hung fiberglass 2/2 grill vinyl windows will be placed on the first level of the south elevation and will be flanked by a set of millwork louvered shutters with central rail. The 2/2 vinyl windows with a half round arch will be placed on the second level of the south elevation and will be flanked at either side by 2 Pella Impervia double hung fiberglass 2/2 grill windows. A shed roof with brackets will be placed on the east elevation. However, no additional information was provided. The garage will be clad in hardy plank 6-inch colonial rough sawn on the first level and will have hardy plank shingle 6-inch staggered edge panel shingles in the color white on the second level beneath the gable. The roof will consist of gaff timberline shingles in the color slate to match the hyphen and the main dwelling. Staff asked the commission to review the overall size of the dormer and the gable details on the rear elevation. Notes that additions should be differentiated from the historic building and not create a false sense of history or match too closely to the historic building. Staff feels the gable detailing and railing is adding a false sense of history and trying to match too much to the Queen Anne style of the main house. The new addition should be designed subordinately to the main structure. So we're citing our historic design guidelines, Chapter 6, new construction addition, not contributing structures, County Code Section 32-7-405.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. And do we have the owner with us?
Yes, we have the property owner as well as the project representative.
Would they like to add any comments at this moment?
So, Laura Landfeld, I have you unmuted as well as Ms. Suzanne Holt, if you'd like to address the commission.
I'm going to let Ms. Holt go first. She's the homeowner.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for your time tonight. I just wanted to state that we absolutely love the Parkton area and love what we consider to be our forever home. One of the things, I mean, it's been important to us, and we've worked hard with Laura to design the addition to maintain the integrity of the original home. Is how we started the conversation with her, and it's been our desire to do that. We're not touching either the front or the rear porches. The addition is only tying into a 10-foot space on the side of the home. Purposely kept the pitch low on that side of the home to avoid impact to the second floor window. We also plan to use, as stated, details from the existing house, from the columns, the gable pitches, shingles, arch details, and all of that. The last thing I kind of wanted to leave with you guys is from a personal standpoint, Rick and I are both aging and each have medical issues, enough so that has warranted a move to Maryland from Texas so that Rick can be very close to his family. They're literally 6.5 miles away. In addition, I have mobility issues. As a result, I have a permanent medical disability parking placard. And so it's important to us to have the attached garage. And we would very much appreciate your consideration for our requests.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I add, as the designer, I hear your concerns about any kind of false representation of a historic character. Being that it's gable front to match the main gable front of the house, it's hard to walk back the historical character of it. I am certainly willing to pull back on some of the details that I did where I replicated it on the old house if it, makes it easier to digest. I can certainly do that. It's the massing, I think, that was the biggest thing that we wanted to design to make it less impactful by creating that hyphen or, a breezeway, quote unquote, look to it, and then the massing of the garage. The large dormer that is on that side elevation is a treed area that you won't see from the road, but it provides lots of nice light coming into that second story space that they're going to use as an office. Again, we're willing to discuss the shape of that. We went back and forth with doing a shed roof as opposed to a gable roof dormer. And I know in the two-dimensional flat elevations, it reads as quite large from that front elevation. But in reality, I'm not sure if you had that picture on there of the side elevation showing that dormer. I didn't see that one in there. So but it's, we're willing to compromise. It's mostly the massing, I think, and having an attached garage that is most important to my clients. And, we're willing to work with you and deal with the feedback about the details of the historical nature.
Well, thank you for that. That's always welcome for us to hear as we prepare our thoughts on it. Commissioners, any thoughts and comments?
One moment. This is the homeowner. May I make one additional comment?
Sure.
Quick. So the first floor of this home is, I don't know, a little over 850 square feet. It's small. And the other areas of the home are bedrooms, restrooms upstairs. We want to live in this home and enjoy it. And the second story area of this garage is intended to be an office, but also a rec room. Like, we very much hope that we can put a pool table in this space so that we can enjoy it. We have purposely designed a porch that outlooks the backyard, that looks down to the NCR trail. We want to be able to enjoy the outdoors. Without the shed dormer on the side, it's going to significantly impact the lighting in that area, as well as the height of usable space. And as Laura mentioned, that side of the home, I mean, the whole yard is completely bamboo. And so we would very much appreciate your consideration of that.
Thank you. Commissioners, comments, thoughts?
This is Lily Mundroff. I was wondering whether is there a maximum height consideration for the structure? I believe it's 15 feet for garages.
I'm sorry, are you asking me? If that's for a detached garage, because it's attached to the house, there's not a height restriction.
Okay. Based on the floor plans also, it looks like the front extends just a little bit beyond the front of the house.
Yes.
Is that correct?
No, actually it does not. Sorry, I just pulled up though. It sits about 4 feet from the front of the house.
Okay. I guess not where the front door is, but the porch, the side porch area. I mean, I'm talking about, I guess, the main. If the front elevation is really
right, the front wall, not the front of the porch. Yes.
Right.
Yes, it sits about 3 feet in front of that, and we can certainly scooch that forward or backward. We were trying to not block the views on what used to be, this house used to be reversed, that the front of the house was the back of the house.
Right.
So the historic elevation on the back of the house, which is the picture you have up there, the lovely picture on the left there, that was the front of the house. And so I was trying to maintain that, and that porch and all the lovely details on that. I didn't want you to be standing on that porch and seeing too much of that garage as you look out to the right from the porch, or on the left of that picture. So that was why that's why we did it that way, because it is a fairly lengthy addition. But we are somewhat flexible with that. I was trying to find a happy medium between, not having it project from beyond the front porch on Hillcrest, and then the back porch overlooking the landscaping.
Right. Okay. And then just a consideration as far as the gable. I kind of I see that there is a lot of detail that tries to mimic the main house, but I think the scale of the gable on the garage is it's wider than, it seems to be wider than the main.
It's 2 feet wider.
Then
it's not too much wider where it yeah.
So, well, it needs to be, I guess, following the guidelines, the Baltimore County landmark guidelines. It really should be less than in terms of size. So maybe a reduction of that width, and the side, I guess you're calling it a dormer. The side dormer should really be subsidiary to that main peak line. I mean, at least it seems the house has them going below the roof ridge. So I guess if there's a
We can lower it. Yeah, it's a
lower it
12-foot
little bit.
wide dormer. Yeah, I wish we had the elevation of that pulled up.
Yeah.
It's 12 feet wide. It's just such a small, the roof area is kind of small up there, but we can certainly, if I, geometries, right? If I make it 10 feet or 11 feet, that ridge line would hit below the main ridge line.
Right.
So certainly we could do that.
Yeah, I think it might help with the, I guess, the massing of the overall thing.
Yeah.
I have one other suggestion. I think maybe if you went to all siding and no shingles on the upper level, it would read as.
Would minimize that, you think? Okay.
I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm just looking at it thinking, oh, if that were that way, you wouldn't think that that's just mimicking so closely the existing house.
Yeah, I'm for that feedback. I think that the, because it is only a story and a half as opposed to the main house, which is 2.5 stories, right? That would imply the significance of the gable end with the shingle in it on the main house. And this is just all siding. So I appreciate that.
Lily, I'm not sure it works to make this narrower. I mean, if this is really
the garage dimension,
I don't think there,
yeah.
for a person that needs accessibility, I don't think it's going to work. But I think if you did mimic the other one so much, the height is less. I mean, it is less than the other house. It's narrower than the other house. It's only that one bay that's wider. And I think if this were treated in a way that wasn't trying to mimic the other house so closely, which we don't like anyway for historic purposes, I think it's would be okay to do it, in my view.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I have on there the details of the gable returns where the roof turns back on itself at the very ends of that gable to mimic the main roof. But like if we got rid of that and also did the straight horizontal siding all the way up, I think that would I think it would address some of the issues about the width feeling a little squat, which is what I just heard from Ms. Meldroff. So I think that the combination of that feedback, I think, might address those. But we really making the garage narrower might be a challenge. It's only 24 feet, which is like a standard dimension for a garage. We could go a little bit, to match exactly the front.
Not for accessibility, though.
Not for, I know, that's why, 24 feet is what we're limited to with the setbacks on the property with having that little breezeway connector piece, hyphen, as you guys call it, that only leaves us with 24 feet. So that's that, we're maxing out the setback. And I think that's fine for a garage, but I wouldn't really want to make it too much narrower.
I have one question and or comment also that might help get us comfortable with the fact that it not look quite as much like the original building there. And that's, I'm skeptical of using some of the prefabricated, vinyl or AZAC trim products because they never do quite look as real as a wood product does. And I like what you're trying to do in terms of the detailing here. My concern is that if you're using kind of the more modern synthetic materials, it's not going to read as nice as you've drawn it.
Okay.
Which from that standpoint, cool. You can look at it and say, it doesn't look like it's clearly not original, but it also might not look quite as clean. So I think abstracting these principles a bit and simplifying them, I think will help on a couple different points here.
Okay, so are you suggesting that the siding can still be hardy, the hardy plank, the composite material, right? That gives us the nice shadow lines, but the trim work like the brackets and the porch columns, that you would prefer to see those in wood?
I mean, I've not seen those consistently well executed.
Okay.
That some others might have other experience, but it looks like someone's trying to fake it.
I mean, the thought behind, which is, well, most homeowners think that and Susie, I'm sorry for speaking for you, but to have the low maintenance aspect, as they said, they're, would like to age in place in this house and, to not have to worry about maintaining the paint on, just part of it, like that railing on the second floor, that whole porch up there, right? That could be
Yeah,
a
I get it,
difficult
but at that
proposition
point,
for them.
yeah, at that point, you just own the fact it's an alternate material and detail around it rather than trying to make it look like
Right.
something that it's not.
Okay, I would rather do that. I'd rather give them the maintenance-free materials and do it in a design that you all approve of.
Thank you.
If that's the option.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments? A motion might be that we approve this with the contingency that the plans are redrawn to incorporate the suggestions that the commissioners have made and brought back to our professional staff for a final sign off. Would somebody be willing to make a motion?
So moved.
It's a long night.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Jessica, can we do a roll call vote?
Is staff comfortable with that? I mean, there's a lot of suggestions.
Could you please restate all the suggestions so we have a nice clear list so that we have something for us and for.
I have a list. I have the list you just told me, but please. I'm
I
writing.
want everybody to make sure that they know what they're voting
Yeah.
for if they're a little confused on what the motion is.
Right. So
You're
the
allowing
suggest-
staff to approve.
Yeah, so the suggestions I heard, and please, commissioners, jump in if I'm hearing them wrong, but I'm going to put them in the simplest terms. Lower the dormer so it doesn't hit the peak. Change the siding so it doesn't replicate the original house. And then incorporate some of the accent pieces using wood for a better look. Are those
Take away some of the accent pieces.
Right.
Have it
Right.
simplify it.
And simplify? Okay.
Some of the architectural details.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So-
I think what wasn't mentioned, John, was, possibility of simplifying. Typically, we don't like the rough sawn colonial, look at the siding, that if that were a smooth, hardy.
Smooth, okay. Yeah, no, I did not catch that one. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
And the dormer part that has the shingles, I thought we had said to just do siding.
Yeah. Take the
Yes.
siding off.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Got that
all the way
down.
around.
Yep.
Yep.
Right. Thank you, Wendy.
Staff,
Okay.
did you get all that?
I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now may we do a roll call vote?
Have Lily, please.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Vince,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes,
Phoebe,
Yes.
John, I'm sorry, Scott,
Yes.
and John, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thank you very
being
much.
with us. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Right, last but not least, we have agenda item number 12, the TP property at 509 Tulip Avenue in Halethorpe, County Council District Number 1. This is a non-contributing resource within the Relay County Historic District, and the applicant has requested to make an asbestos siding replacement. The property at 509 Tulip Ave was constructed in 1954 and is a non-contributing resource within the Relay County Historic District. The house is sheathed in asbestos tile on the front elevation under the pent roof. It is covered with vertical plank/plywood. The applicant has requested to replace the existing asbestos tiles with CertainTeed monogram 5-inch Dutch lap siding in the color rough cedar. The applicant notes that some tiles are cracked and separating from the house, although no photos showing the existing conditions were submitted in this application. In addition, the applicant has requested to replace the plywood siding around the front entry with CertainTeed vinyl straight edge cedar impressions shingle siding. And just as a note to the commission, that the neighboring property at 507 Tulip Avenue on the left is another infill house of a similar age and style that has vinyl siding. While vinyl may not be the best material choice, the LPC can be flexible when making material changes to non-contributing resources that make practical and aesthetic sense, as well as being appropriate for the age and style of the property. So staff asked the LPC to determine if the proposal meets our design guidelines and to approve, deny, or modify accordingly, citing Chapter 4, Exterior Walls and Foundations, County Code, Section 32-7-405.
Thank you. Do we have the owner with us?
We have one attendee, Mr. Bob Carter. I'm not familiar if Mr. Carter is the project manager, but Mr. Carter, I have you unmuted if this applies. Did you check your volume? Okay.
Well, Mr. Carter, thank you for being patient and staying with us all this time, but we can't hear you just now.
Do we have any serious issues with this proposal?
I don't know. Ed, we're going to talk about that.
I'm just asking commission if anyone has.
Well, Ed, to your point, why don't we go ahead and start that? And if Mr. Carter can join us as we're in conversation, we'd be happy to have him. Do we have comments or discussion from the commissioners?
I think what's being proposed looks reasonable.
And so we have a motion on the floor that
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
And a roll call vote?
Have Lily, please.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Vince.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Phoebe.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
And John, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have a few tax credit applications which were approved by the staff. Do you want to run through those, Jessica?
Sure. This is first we have the Marshall property at 125 Rosewood Avenue in Catonsville. It's a contributing resource within the Old Catonsville National Register Historic District. And the applicants received Part 2 approval for exterior painting. And we have the Stewart property at 4024 Stewart Road in Stevenson. So a contributing resource within the Green Spring Valley National Register Historic District. And the applicant received Part 2 approval for slate roof and copper dormer repairs as well as chimney repairs. Then we have the Hoeing property at 2316 Bowerschmidt Drive in Essex. This was final landmark number 110, Planner's Paradise / Bowerhurst and setting. And the applicants received emergency Part 2 approval for in-kind copper chimney flashing and replacements, as well as mortar repointing and repairs. We have the Wartzel property at 1201 Western Run Road in Cockeysville. This is a contributing resource within the Western Run Belfast National Register Historic District, and they received Part 2 approval for structural repairs to the historic bridge. Then finally, we have the Kamar property at 662 Register Avenue in Towson. It's a contributing resource within the Stoneleigh National Register Historic District, and the applicant received Part 2 approval for a new HVAC installation and the refinishing of the original wood flooring.
Thank you. Thank you, especially Jessica and Caitlin, for all the detail and the work you did to prepare for this meeting. There was a lot that went into it, and really appreciate that. I also thank you so much to the commissioners for staying with it and being patient as we went through those things. We had a lot to do tonight. Appreciate it. Are there any other comments for the general welfare, or may we have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
And acclamation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. See you in
You
July.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Next
Bye.
time.
Bye. Bye.
All right.